For today's shir, at least the bulk of the shir, I would like to focus on the Yalkut Bi'urim here in Yevamot Stadium and Beis, and we're looking at page Chaf Hey. The Gemara says that in order to justify the cancellation of Bittul Aget, Shalo B'fnei Ashliach, we implement the principle called Kol D'Mekadesh Adaiti D'Rabbanu Mekadesh Afkeinu Rabbanu L'Kedushim. So the Chachamim will completely nullify the original Kedusha. It's not that she's an Eishes Ish and now the get is going to remove her Ishus. That can't work on a Doraisa level, bless you, because the Baal was Mavatal the get. He removed the Lishma in the get. The Rabbana want to negate his negation, and they want to be Mavatal his Bittul. But what are they doing? Are they resurrecting the get from the dead? Are they saying and declaring that a get that's Chosel Doraisa is Kosher Rabbanan? No, that's not what they're saying. They cannot do so because according to Rabbah, it's beyond the purview of the authority of the Chachamim to create a get that doesn't exist. And to take an HSE to receive the get that's completely batel and say, no, she's Megureshes. That they can't do. Because Ein Koch Biad Chachamim, according to Rabbah, Lakar Dov Min HaTorah. Rav Chizki, you have no proof. Why and how do the Chachamim allow for this get? No, they're not recognizing the get. It's not the efficacy of the get that breaks up the issues, but rather they're going to break up the original marriage. So the Gemara says, Tenach, I understand that if you initiated the marriage with Kesef, but not in the case of Bia. So we begin with Rashi. Rashi says, Adaita D'Rabbanu Mekadesh. Says Rashi, you'll take a look inside, here on Stadium and Beis. Shetole B'das Chachamim. In the wide lines, there are actually steps over here. So we're talking the middle step of the wide lines. It is on line 4. Ole b'das chachamim, da kedas Moshe v'Yisrael ka'amar. When he married her, he added to his declaration of marriage kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, and in doing so, he has effectuated the Adaite D'Rabbanu Mekadesh, which means that he is inviting the Chachamim to either approve or disapprove of this marriage. Rashi in Masechet Gittin, where there's a parallel sugya, adds a few words. He writes, Hilkoch Paki. Paki means you can undermine and nullify. Sharei Kishe when he married her, Almanas came Kiddush. Almanas is a lotion of Tanai. We take the words that came out of his mouth at the time of Kiddush Kedas Moshe Yisrael, and then we rewrite them. We reformulate them as Almanas came. I am marrying this woman on the condition that it's Kedas Moshe Yisrael. That the Batei Dinim, the courts of Israel, will affirm and approve this marriage. Kavanaso, according to Rashi, who mekadech almanashi yaskimu chachamim l'kedusha, v'sheyuchlu lafkiyam, they can remove the kedusha and undermine the kifid daitam if they so desire and so decide. V'havi ki mekadech b'tana. But then Rashi adds a few words. And this is what confuses us. Rashi says, Vafki inu Rabbanon. This is already line 5, I believe. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Line 5. Al Yidei get zeh. What does that mean, Al Yidei get zeh? No way, no how. The get is worthless. You want to tell me that he was Makadich 50 years ago, Al Tnai, on the condition that the Chacham approve, and now they disapprove? That's one thing. Then you torpedo the Kiddushin through the channels of Tnai. It's like a man is Makadish and Yishal Menashe Titni L'Masayim Zuz, and she never fulfilled the condition and delivered him the Masayim Zuz. But Rashi says, Al Yidei get set. Very different. Again, we could interpret Rashi just on a technical basis, like Steve was saying before about, Trufa like they do in Nuim of Elul. It's just a technicality. Rashi's saying, at what point in time will the Rabbanan decide we disapprove of this marriage, and we're going to be mafkir the marriage because we were so authorized to do so at the moment that he married her and he recited Kedas Moshe? At what point are they going to do it? The shliach is on his way. He has not yet arrived and delivered the get to this woman. The Baal was already mevatel the get in the Bezdin where he's located. So at this point, the Rabbanan are going to stand up and say we disapprove of the Kiddushin? No. They're only going to do that the moment that the get reaches her hand. And she has innocently every right to believe that the get is valid. Little does she know that her husband was mevatel this get. So that's all Rashi means. Al Yidei get zeh means from the moment that the get reaches her hand. The Rabbanan are not going to step in and exercise their authority of mafkia kedushin until she gets the get. Premature, they're not going to do it. They're not going to say, well, the moment he was mevatel the get, we're going to be ma'oker the kedushin, we'll be mafkia the kedushin. That they're not going to do. They're only going to do that from the moment that the catastrophe could come about, and this woman, thinking that she received the get, went ahead and got married. When does that catastrophe come about? The moment that the get reaches her hand. That's all Rashi means. It's very innocent. Rashi's just making a technical, mechanical term. Now, according to Rashi, the Gemara asks the kasha, Penach, I understand this to Kadesh B'Kaspa. Says Rashi, Vishavinu Limos Matana. Once again, Rashi's a little bit unclear. What do you mean, Shavinu Limos Matana? How do these mos become matana? He gave the mos as mos kedushin. Now magically, and by the way, the Isur against magic is in this week's parsha. Magically, we're going to transform his kesef kedushin into kesef matana. It's not he's giving her a gift. Man is not giving a gift. I mean, he doesn't expect to get back the money or the ring. But he's giving it as kedushin. It's kesef kedushin. What do you mean it's maton? See, he quotes here in the Mesifta, Mikach hefker bezdin hefker, that the Rabbanon could convert kesef kedushin into kesef matana through hefker bezdin hefker. Hefker bezdin hefker means that which you own the Rabbanan could declare that you don't own it. But to say that they could declare it as most matan. In any event, Rashi here in Masechet Yevamot, to the best of my knowledge, does not mention Hefker Bezdin Hefker. He does so in Gittin Lamed Gimel. Aval Kim Shemakadish B'Bia Lo Shayach Hafka Zu. There's no Hefker Bezdin Hefker on a Bia. The Eichef Kiyu Chacham Mes HaKiddush. How could they undermine the Kiddush? So Rabosa, we're beginning to see that Rashi is not operating exclusively under the Tnai that we spoke about before, under the category of Almanas, Sheyaskiru Chachamim, Kitsha, because if that be the case, then there's no difference between Kesef and Bia. In both cases, the Rabbanan say we disapprove of the marriage. And since his original marriage was Almanas Sheyaskiru, the Rabbanan exercised their right to disapprove of the marriage, and the Tanai will now be Mavatal the Kiddush. Whether it was Kiddush Kesef or Bia makes no difference. But if Rashi is activating the principle of Hefker Bezdin Hefker, then we can differentiate between Kiddushay Kesef and Kiddushay Bia, because clearly Kiddushay Kesef lends itself to Hefker Bezdin Hefker, but not Kiddushay Bia. So apparently, and again, what I'm about to tell you, I don't understand. I'm just deriving a mathematical conclusion. When Rashi says Tnai Almanas, it means that the Almanas is going to operate within the structure of Kiddush. The Rabbanan are going to create a situation in which they will invalidate the Kiddush. And they can do so in Kiddushay Kesef. They can create, through Hefker Bezdin Hefker, a change in the mos, in the money, and it becomes mos matan. That authority they have, that power they have, that's vested by virtue of Hefker Bezdin Hefker. So it's not just that the Rabbanan will stand up on one fine day and say, we disapprove of the marriage, and therefore we are mavatal the Kiddushin based on tonight. That can work in Bia as well. But rather, they are looking for a framework in which they can somehow now disapprove in a way that through that framework and through that mechanism, they annul the marriage. And the Gemara says, if that be the case, if they're looking for a mechanism by which they have the authority to annul the marriage, then they can undermine the marriage through Hefker Bezdin Hefker if he was Mekadisha through Kesef. But if he was Mekadisha with Bia, what kind of framework can they implement? What kind of halacha can they apply here that would create a framework in which his Kiddushin is invalid? Mekadisha with Bia, we don't know how he does it. The Ramban asks the following question on Rashi. Im HaMakadish Kiddush al das Chachamim Shah Kiddushin yu betelim lefi daita is ma kushas haGemara teina to kodesh b'kas v'kodesh b'bia ma yikol u'meima kevan shekiddush al das Chachamim einem tzrichim lahafkir mos k'dei lafkia Kiddushin al rak levakla, meaning to disapprove of the marriage. Baruch shekibanu, we had Siyata D'Shmaya to think of the same argument as the Ramban, and we answered that Rashi holds it's not straight away bittul Tnai, but rather that what the husband is saying to the Rabbanan is he's saying you can disapprove and operate and activate one or other of the psulim to invalidate the marriage, whatever you have in your repertoire. And if you have Hefker Bez and Hefker, that's fine. And then you could disapprove with the marriage through Hefker Bez and Hefker. But in Kiddushay Bia, what arsenal do the Rabbanan have in their storehouse that they can undermine the Kiddush? The Ramban says that Tena Kiddush B'Kaspa, Dafka Kishum HaKadosh B'Kesef, then Bal Korcho B'Kadosh Al Das Chacham. If he's marrying her with money, then he must be marrying her on condition that the Rabbanan will approve of the marriage. Kema Chikam Im Lo Yekadish Al Taitim. Harem Yichol Lafkias HaKiddush Mikoch Hefker Bezin Hefker V'Eina Mekudeshes. The Rabbanan are warning you. Listen, my friend, you want to marry this girl? You better marry her on our terms. Because if you don't, then we'll be mafkia the Kiddushin by virtue of our power of Hefker Bez and Hefker. Hefker Bez and Hefker is like an albatross, like a sword that the Chachamim are waving, a threat to the Makadesh. And they say, listen, buddy, we don't need your time. We can remove your Kiddushin by removing your ownership over the Kesef through Hefker Bez and Hefker. But you know what? Let's be good buddies, and you do it my way, our way. And just make a statement of Kedas Moshe Yisrael. What threat can the Chachamim use? What power, what arsenal do they have in their back pocket that they can threaten you and say, look, buddy, if you do not comply with our wishes and add this Tanai of our approval, then we'll undermine and torpedo your Kedusha. They can do that in Kesef through Hefker Bez and Hefker. They can't do so in beer. So what's the answer to the Gemara? Mitaretzes HaGemara, Shamakadesh Midaito I don't need the threat of Hefker Bez and Hefker. Rabbanan could be mafkia the Kedusha. V'lachen, gam b'Kedushet Bia, yecholim heim mafkia ha'Kedusha. V'atam. Now, again, if according to the Ramban, the final answer to the Gemara is that Rabbanan could be mafkia the Kedusha, even without Hefker Bez and Hefker. So first you have to ask yourself why and how is that so? Is Rabban operating with Tanai? And secondly, what does the Gemara mean when it answers Shavinu Rabbanan l'biasal bias nus? Says the Ramban, Atam shehutzufa Gemara loma Shavinu Rabbanan l'bilasal bias nus. Kidei liyashev matehei al bias. The Gemara is nervous here. What do we do with this beer? And the beer sort of, if we're alive and well, it would stare us in the face and say, "What do you mean? I'm a Kiddushay beer. You want to be mafkia Kiddushin? Go ahead, but I'm Kiddushay beer." What power do you have to neutralize Kiddushay beer? That within the context of the power of the Chachamim to be mafkia the Kiddushin, they can be mafkia his beer and change the status of his beer and make it into a beer snus. So the Gemara initially wasn't happy. And the Gemara is asking, what are you going to do with his beer? His beer is constantly generating ishus or claiming that there was valid ishus. And the Gemara's answer is no. That the Rabbanan are empowered to be mafkia Kedushin, and the beer is going to be a beer snus. And a beer snus has no authority to come forward and claim, well, the ishus is caught. Tosfos b'Kiddushin Daf Gimel Pirshu shehuksha l'Gemara ech yafkiu chachamim bia shel Kiddushin v'yomru she'ein Kiddush of Kiddushin hari min haTorah hi mekudeshes v'afilu l'mad yom yesh koch biad chacham lakar dom min haTorah kan sheyesh avera sharei hi eshes ish ein b'kocham lafki. Now, I have to assume that Tosfos and Ksubas is operating with Hefker Bez and Hefker. So Tena Kiddushay Bia, but how can the Tena Kiddushay Kesef? But how can the Chacham be Mafkia Kiddushay Bia? I mean, the Torah recognizes this Kiddush. Even Sheyesh Avera, Sharei Hi Eshes Ish. The footnote says, Li'achar Akira Tehei Avera Biyod. I don't know. He has the footnote here, which I don't understand. He's learning in the footnote that in the trade-off here, it doesn't make sense that the Rabbanon. Yeah, but that doesn't fit. The language is Harei Hi Eshes Ish. And he writes here, Liachar Akira, Tehei Avera Biyod, but it's not an Avera of Eshes Ish. It's Nuz. I don't know. And finally, we have a Rashi here, about 10 lines up from the bottom of the page. Rashi says, Kevan de B'daita de Rabbanon Tola, since he said that my marriage depends upon the approval of the Rabbanon. Rabbanon Amur, V'chi yoyev la get, ki hai, tibatel bia, tehevi bias nus. Rashi's going back to his original pshat, that he was Tola on the approval of the Chacham. The Chacham said that when she receives this get, they will be Mevatel the Kiddushin, because he was Tola al Daitov, and Memela is Bila Zabias. The Istiyam. Now Rashi quotes another approach to the Sunnah. Tenach Kaddish Lekas Bekaspa, the Kiddushay Kesef Dirabana, Pillei Plan. That the whole enterprise of Kiddushay Kesef is rabbinic enterprise. Rabbo said, do you know what that means? For all of us, every single one of us, that it's only been Rabbanan that we're married. Tell that to your wife. Because you gave her a tamas, which is Kiddushay Kesef, and that's only the Rabbanan. Kiddushay Bia, Kiddushay Doraisa. The Torah recognizes Kiddushay Bia, but not Kiddushay Kesef. So that could be good, because then maybe we are married to our wives Doraisa, because after the Kesef, we had at some point Bia. And the Bia clinches the Kedusha. Even though, again, at the time of the Bia, he was not interested in Kedusha. He already married her with the Kesef. So is my Iko Meimar. The Gemara is saying that you can understand how the Rabbanan have the power and the authority to annul a marriage, which was only rabbinic to begin with. So we have a principle, Heimam and Heimam, but the same Rabbanan who recognized this marriage decided to undermine this. But in a case where he was Mekadosh of the Bia, that's Kedusha Doraisa, how are the Rabbanan able to be Mafkia the Kedusha? V'tos gadol hu biyadam, says Rashi. It's a very bad mistake. The Kedusha Kesef Doraisa. How does Rashi know the Kedusha Kesef Doraisa? It's not an invention and an action to Rabbanan. The Migzera Shav the Kicha Mistei Ephraim Gamal Masechet Kedushin. We have a Gzera Shava. The Torah says in Kedushin, it says the Lakha, and in Stei Ephron it says Asoda Shalakach. And just like Avram Avinu purchased the Sada, what we call the Marasa Machpelah, Stei Ephron with Kesef, so too you can be Mekadosh and Isha with Kesef. And Rashi says Gzereshava B'Sinai Nemra. A Gzereshava was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. V'chol Yud Gimel Midos, as well as the balance of the 13 Midos. All this was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, and thus it has the status of Da'oraisa. And furthermore, I Kiddushay Kesef min Rabbanan mi katlina nafshe alei the Baal Arusa Beskila. If a man has a relationship with a woman who's married with Erusin, but not Nisuin, he's put to death. Why is he put to death? If the man married her with Kesef, that's only the Rabbanan. And on the Doraisa level, he's not married to. Now, it's interesting that Rashi gives the case of an Arusa, not an Asua, because after Nisuin, he already clinches the Ishus Doraisa with Bia, which implies, by the way, that my question is not a question. I said, well, maybe his Bia is Aldas the Kesef. That's as long as she's an Arusa. Once she's an Asua, the Bia is Bia's Ishus, the Shem Ishus. The Od, and furthermore, my Shinuya Deshani Shavur Rabbanan. What do you mean the Rabbanan made his Bia into Bias Nus? Hakakashale, the original kasha was Hechi Matzi Rabbanan Lafkua Midu Doraisa. If he married her with Bia, how can he Mafkia Ishus Doraisa? And then Mishani Le Shavur Rabbanan. The Rabbanan made his Bia into Bias Nus. Nami Afkaasi. You're back to square one. The Rabbanan being Mafkia the issue. How can they do so? So the Gemara didn't answer it. And according to Rashi, the Rabbanan made his Bia to be a Skus. I don't know exactly how they're able to do that. Rashi doesn't spell that out. The Gemara at the beginning said, what are you going to do with this Bia? You know, you want to be Mafkiya's Kedushin, that's fine. In the case of Kesef, it could be You do away with his kesef and convert it into matana through hefker bezin. But what do you do with this bia? The Gemara says, you know what? No problem. The bia is a bia. I mean, what was Gemara thinking in his kasha? What was Gemara thinking in the teretz? In the kasha, the Gemara no doubt thought that you can't do away with the bia. The bia itself is a bia ishus. But somehow the Gemara answers, no, Shavyuna Rabbana Labila, Bilus Nus, the Rabbana made his bia into bias nus. That's a magic that we don't understand how it's founded, and what are the foundations and the underlying logic of that power of the Chachamim to convert a bia into a bias nus. Okay, then, so let's just make a note of where we got up to. Okay. And then thank you. Have a great day.